everyone, welcome back. And in this video, I'll be giving you some information on story-driven project. So I'll be giving you some, overall information of how projects that, are driven based on stories. Okay, so let's get into it. So first one is, what is a story-driven project? So a story-driven project captures requirements as user stories, okay? And if you see, it is totally contrary to the traditional software development. So in the traditional software development, let's take a recap of it. Let's say it's the waterfall approach. So over here, if you see, the first stage is you have the requirement gathering stage, and clients are of course involved in this stage. The second one is analysis and the documentation phase. So over here, if you see, all the requirements are going to be captured, whichever all the requirements that is required for the project to get executed, and all the features that are required gets captured in this particular phase. And if you see, the drawbacks of this is that it requires extensive documentation. Okay, so in this stage, extensive documentation is done, and once it's finalized, no changes are entertained. Okay, because initially you need to provide all the requirements, there's no changes, that is almost most of the time not entertained. And also, if you see, requirements are mostly from the system perspective, so there's no way in which you write down the system, the requirements, in a way that is easily understood by the clients. Okay, so these are some drawbacks. If you see, in the next phase, it's the design phase. So over here, clients are not involved. Okay, and if you see, there are no feedbacks also that can be given during this phase. Similar to the development phase also, whatever is being developed, clients are not, involved in this particular phase. They don't know much of what is being developed, etc. Also, no feedbacks can be provided in this phase also, because clients are not involved. So there's no chance of getting feedbacks. If you see, the only time when they again come back to the scene is that during the testing phase. So you finish developing the product, and then you bring the product and you show it to the client. It's at this point that clients are involved. But the drawback is, sometimes if the product is as per what the client required, then it's fine. But what happens if the client never expected something what you built? Okay, at that time, there's going to be a lot of effort, time and money that is going to be lost and wasted. So this is the traditional way in which a project gets executed. So if you see, the clients, when they are involved, it's during the first requirement gathering phase and also in the testing phase. So these are the two phases only in which clients get involved. Now let us look at the agile approach. The agile approach is totally beautiful because it embraces the requirements, the feedbacks of the clients, and also it embraces communication and continuous improvement. Okay, so if you see, it's the same phases that get followed, but it's in an iterative manner. So you have the requirement gathering phase, you have the analysis phase, you have the design, development and testing phase, but it happens in iterations. So it doesn't need to happen in one stretch. And if you notice, clients are involved in every stage, right from the requirement gathering. When you do an analysis, you sit and brainstorm sometimes with clients. They are aware of the analysis, they provide their feedbacks. Designs, you involve them in designs, you give them the designs, they give you their feedbacks. You do some development also. Once the development is done, they get to see the release, they get to see what's being developed, they give you constant feedbacks. Okay, so this is the real beauty of agile. Okay, the agile approach. And in this video, I want to focus on two main phases, which is the requirement gathering and the analysis and documentation, which mainly focuses on story driven projects. Okay, so if you look over here in agile, if you see the requirement gathering phase, clients are involved. Okay, and also all the requirements are not gathered in one go. Okay, so agile says, give us the requirements, but we don't need all the requirements. Give us first what requirements you need, let's build it, let's test it and see whether that's something that you expect, where the customers are adopting to it, and let's keep iterating and building upon that. So that's the main idea of approach, of the agile approach. And it also allows new requirements to come in. If you see the analysis and documentation phase, at this point is when you gather requirements. The requirements are captured as user stories. Now, these user stories are the core essence of story driven development. Okay, and if you see the beauty of these stories is that the requirements are in a natural language that can be understood by the client. So traditionally, when you record requirements, it's all put in a requirement document. You write down functional documents, business rules document. Mostly, it's from the system perspective. It's not from the user perspective. So the main highlight in this is that the requirements are very simple. It's from the user, it's understandable by the user also. And also, clients can mention which story is a priority and that will be developed and released first. So they also have the liberty of mentioning what they need first, then you build that, you show it to them, they give you your feedback and they validate that, and they you can again your team can build upon that. So if you one thing that you need to notice over here is requirements are captured as stories. Okay, so now this is the starting point of story driven development and story driven projects. So okay, now we have these stories. So let's see how does this go about. So once again, let's compare this with the traditional approach, the traditional process. So imagine you have this one requirement document for the entire project. So once you have all the requirements, it's then transferred on to the design and then it's transferred on for development. So in contrary to this, in the story driven process, as I said, requirements are captured in the form of user stories. So I've taken videos on what are user stories, how do you write down user stories, how do you split and merge user stories. There are different videos. I'll provide them in the description box. You can have a look at them and how to write user stories. But now for this video, let's assume that there is a user story in place. Okay, so these are how user stories are listed. For example, as a user, I should be able to upload my resume in the job portal system so that I can apply for a job. This can be a user story. So indirectly, the requirement is that the user should be able to upload a document, which is their resume, and the document should be saved and it should be sent to the job owner or the person who is publishing that job out, okay, that vacancy. So these are different stories that capture different requirements of the projects. So now you have these stories. So how do or what do I do with these stories? The second step is to check with the client, okay, what are the priorities? Okay, so this is not was, it's what. So check with the client what are the priorities. You might have a huge list of user stories, but everything cannot be done in one iteration, because an iteration might be for just 2 weeks or 3 weeks, which is totally impossible. Okay, so check with the client first, saying that hey, we have these 2 week iterations and these are the set of user stories. So now you tell me what is the first priority or what do you need first. Okay, so sometimes it's based on clients requirements, sometimes it's really must have features, because there's no point in building an application which has recommendations and other nice to have makeups on it when the real core functionality is not built yet. Okay, so there are different ways in which you can prioritize these user stories. So one could be based on priority and another one could be based on the need. Okay, so once you have, okay, whatever way you prioritize your user stories, once you have them prioritized, the next stage is to collaborate with your team to estimate story points. So now teams, once they have their user stories and once they have prioritized the user stories, so indirectly requirements get prioritized. So now what happens is that each user story needs to be estimated. That is, the amount of work needs to be defined. And this is not the same as what you do in traditional projects where you say this task is going to take XYZ hours, or it's going to take Y amount of days, or it's going to take X amount of days. You don't, estimate based on days and hours. In Agile, you estimate based on relative sizing. So I've also taken videos on what is relative sizing and how you can size stories. So I've provided those links. You can take a look at them later on. But for now, relative sizing is something where, let's say for example, you have a story. Okay, you as you analyze that story and you see, okay, let's maybe I can just rate it to a one pointer. Okay, or I can say it's quite a small story. Now the second story that you take, you don't estimate it independently, you compare it with other stories. So if the second story, I need to compare it with the first one, and if it's little more, complex, or it needs more time, then it's little more bigger than the first one. So that is relative sizing. So the second story could be a two pointer, or it can be a medium story. So now I take the third story. If it's going to be almost the same, then I can say, okay, it's again a medium story. But still, I need to compare it with the other stories to see what is going to be its relative size. So you are comparing every story with other stories in order to define the size. Okay, it's like just comparing a t-shirt with a small size and with a extra large size. You would know where to fit it. If it's going to be medium, it's going to be something bigger than small, but it's going to be lesser than extra large. So this is the way agile teams also estimate user stories. It's based on relative sizing. Okay, so once the team has estimated their different stories, you come up with an overall story point saying that this is going to take around 50 story points, okay, in order to get completed. So the requirements are worth 50 story points. So once you have those story points in hand and you have individual story points that have been estimated for your user stories, the next one is now the team needs to get prepped up, okay, in order to start off with the development. So now if you see, the fourth stage is to collaborate with your team to define your team's velocity. So you must be wondering, what is velocity? I have also taken a detailed video on that. You can click on the link that I have provided in the description box. But for an overview, what is velocity? Velocity is the number of story points a team can complete in one iteration. So let's say you're having one iteration. You just have to define how many story points can my team complete in this one iteration. Okay, so usually the very first iteration that you start, you don't have any background information or data or analytics to say that, hey, my team can complete, 10 or 20 story points. It's just a rough guess that you do. But over the time, when you have completed multiple iterations, you try to average out the number of story points that get completed in every iteration, and you're able to clearly define what could be your team's velocity. That is, how many story points a team can complete in one iteration. So let's say for this example's sake, we say that the team has a velocity of 10, which means that the team would be able to complete 10 story points in one iteration. So now we have this, the team, once they define the velocity, they can even communicate it with their stakeholders and with the client saying that we can do 10 story points, and now what we're going to do is let's start planning the iteration. So the team sits down and plans for the iteration as to what is needed for the first iteration. So you can pull in story points over here. So story points are pulled in for the first iteration provided they all sum up to 10 story points. So for example, story points can be 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2, but when you sum it up, it has to be 10 story points, which means that the team commits to complete 10 story points in that one iteration. So now that you know you have 50 story points, so you would have like a rough estimate as to how many iterations need to be done in order to complete a particular project. So in our example, we need to approximately have 5 to 6 iterations to complete the product. Okay, so this is how the iterations are planned. And once an iteration is complete, okay, the team has finished an iteration, it just doesn't end there. As I said, in Agile, you showcase this to clients. They get to see regular feedback, releases. They get to provide their feedbacks. So at this time, whatever is being developed, that value will be showcased to the client. Okay, the client gets to see what is being built. They get to validate whether, yes, this is something that I need, or whether they expected something else. They provide their feedback. Sometimes there are chances that even feedbacks are got plus new requirements can be given. So when new requirements are given, it's added to the backlog and again reprioritized. Later on, when you prioritize them, sometimes these items for your second sprint iteration, what you planned, could be a little bit different from what you planned, because some stories might be removed and the more prioritized ones may jump in, but that's okay. But all I'm coming to say that at the end of every iteration, there's a review, there's feedbacks, and there's other requirements coming in. So this is all about how projects get executed with user stories. Okay, so it's called the story driven projects. Okay, so many companies are at present trying to adopt this method. Why is because in the traditional approach, requirements are not entertained, and businesses keep facing different customer requirements every day. Business trends keep changing. So the customers or the clients who come to you with to build a product, they also feel that they need to satisfy their end customers, okay, with whatever solution they are trying to provide. So they don't like it when we say, hey, you just provide the requirements, we'll build it and give it back to you, but nothing more, nothing less. Now everything keeps changing, so people want more on a regular basis, people want feedbacks, people want to update. So that's why this method proves to be very flexible, and it also brings a lot of value, and the team is also in a very good position to adapt to this. So that's why many companies are adopting to this agile way of project development. Some they follow waterfall, but partially when it comes to requirements, they are following a hybrid way of capturing requirements as user requirements or user stories. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to provide in this video. I know it's kind of a lengthy video, but I hope I gave you some knowledge about what is story driven projects. And if you like this video, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.